welcome all. Thank you for tuning in to Cedarly Radio, your guide to films playing at the Art House for the week of January 2nd to January 8th. But really, it's the year-end wrap-up. It's the episode for all of 2019. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Dave Huffman, Director of Marketing for Cleveland Cinemas. As Aaron mentioned, we'll be discussing the top films at the Cedarly for 2019, as well as our own picks for the best films of the year. And we have a late addition to our schedule, so we'll be discussing the film Cunningham that'll be opening on January 3rd.
All right, well, I would like to say it's tradition, but we only have 1 year in so far on the podcast, so I guess we're making it a tradition. The end of the year is a great time to look back at the year and see... Well, really, it's what everybody was watching that was at the Cedar.
Right.
It's not just our picks. We broke it down kind of by categories. We're a bit more official, I would say, than the Golden Globes because we have some more definitive lines of comedy, drama, documentary, foreign language. And we're also going to do the overall most attended, most watched, the films that Clevelanders and people visiting Cleveland loved playing at the Art House this year. Dave, let's start off with comedy. Comedies this year. Did you have any... thoughts on the kind of like the state of comedies as they were coming through the Art House this year? Anything really grab you?
It was a good year for comedies at the Cedarly. We always talk about how we have a lot of very serious and heavy-handed kind of sad movies that we play a lot of times at the Art House. But this year we actually had some really fun movies. Some of them had some, serious elements to them as well, but mostly it was pretty fun. And the fifth, most popular comedy that we had this year was Late Night, which starred Emma Thompson and Mindy Kaling. That was about she was a late night talk show host, Emma Thompson was. It was a very fun little movie.
Well, like you said, too, it's got that, I think we mentioned it on the show and we discussed it, but Emma Thompson is usually more known for the art house, serious, I'm a, amazingly accomplished actress. It was nice to see her be able to kind of stretch some, comedy chops and branch out that way. Number 4 was Danny Boyle's most recent film, Yesterday, which was not only number 4 most attended comedy, but also just, you could tell it was just such an audience pleaser. People just walked out just clearly... bouncing their step and happier watching the movie, which is always great to see at the theater. Number 3 is Jojo Rabbit, a more recent one that just came out was at November, I think, for Jojo Rabbit.
And probably the most controversial comedy of the year because it has been a little bit divisive. I personally love that movie, but it hasn't universally gotten acclaim because some people just don't quite think that you can satirize Hitler like that. But I thought it was very well done. And then our number 2 comedy for the year was another one that had some dramatic overtones, which was The Farewell. And that was starring Awkwafina, and that's the film about the young woman who goes back to China whenever she finds out that her grandmother is going to be passing away.
That one, I realized as you said that, we're looking at this comedy list, I really just picture the posters for the movies a lot of times in my head visually, and that poster isn't comedic.
No, it isn't. It's very serious. I mean, Awkwafina is a hilarious comedian, but she is sad-faced on the poster.
Right. Yeah.
But, again, the movie is called The Farewell.
It is.
For a reason.
And
it's got a serious topic to it.
Yeah. But like you said, it is overall comedy.
Yeah.
And our number 1 most attended comedy this year was Once Upon a Time in ... Hollywood from Quentin Tarantino, which... I don't know. I saw some pushback at first when I saw it was nominated for the best comedy musical at the Golden Globes, but I laughed a lot all 3 times I watched that movie.
No, 100% it belongs as a comedy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's not the genre I don't think Tarantino's going to be known for, but it did seem more overtly, although I laughed a lot at Hateful Eight and some of his other movies too, but this seems more overtly comedic in a lot of ways. That Bruce Lee scene just had me cry laughing.
Yeah, there's definitely humor in all of his films, but this one seemed to be far more intentional with getting laughs.
Right. Absolutely. Up next, we have our top dramas, most attended dramas of the year. You want to start off with number 5 on that one, Dave?
Absolutely. That was the Judy Garland film starring Renee Zellweger, Judy. That was our number 5. That was quite popular here, and she is still one of the top contenders for Best Actress. Not that the Oscar nominations haven't come out yet, but she's got all the, all the signs are there that she's going to be an Oscar contender.
Number 4 is continuing a streak of musicals making their way into the dramatic category here, is Rocket Man, the Dexter Fletcher's follow-up to... Do I have that story right? He kind of stepped in to help save Bohemian Rhapsody, and then he went right on with his next project, was making Rocket Man.
I believe so, yeah.
Which between the two, do you have a Bohemian Rhapsody, Rocketman preference?
Oh, Rocketman's definitely
okay.
a better
Me too.
movie.
Yeah,
yeah.
I adore Rami Malek, but no, just the overall movie Rocketman was far superior to Bohemian Rhapsody.
I loved Rocketman.
Yeah.
So. And then number 3 was, I'm sure, is going to be one of Aaron's favorite films of the year, which is The Irishman, Martin Scorsese's, again, huge Oscar contender. It's winning a lot of critical awards, and rightfully so. It's a fantastic film. Played here just for a few weeks, but the fact that it only played for a few weeks before it went to Netflix and had such huge crowds for it just shows how popular it was and how much people wanted to get a chance to see it on the big screen.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, it's such a limited window. It was almost like a special event type thing, and it still got that kind of a crowd. I feel like that one also was really helped with built-in lifelong marketing as Martin Scorsese as a film geek to like, hey, see it on the big. Like if Christopher Nolan, for some reason, made a deal with Netflix in the future, like people would still rush out to see his movies on the big screen before they saw it on the small screen. Number 2 really surprised me. I like Cassie Lemons a lot as a filmmaker, and like Eve's Bayou is still one of those like best of the 90s movies, and her new film Harriet made it to number 2 for best dramas. And this is also where it's probably worth noting, these are, most attended by those film geeks that are here and around Cleveland, Ohio area. That's not a movie that's on the top of attendance-wise of many lists, but it really, really connected with the audience here in Cleveland.
Well, and I will say this, that film was helped by a lot of school groups.
That was nationwide, though, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, but here at the Cedar Lee, we had a lot of school groups coming to see that film in the morning, just having their own private shows, watching that. So that was certainly boosted that. And no big surprise, the number 1 drama this year at the Cedar Lee was the film that we all joked about being sort of like the Titanic for art houses this year, which was Downton Abbey, the TV series that was brought to the big screen here. And that was by far the most popular movie at the Cedar Lee this year.
Up next, we have my favorite category, which is the top foreign language films that came to America, specifically here to Cleveland this past year. And the audience reacted quite well. Most recently, it was Pain and Glory from Spain. That was Almodovar's new film. That came in at number 5 as the 5th most watched foreign language film this year at the theater.
And then Woman at War from Iceland. That was our number 4.
The Invisibles from Germany came in at number 3, which that was one of those, if I remember correctly, had a kind of a unique way to the theatrical run where it played at the Cleveland Jewish Film Festival and it had a good reaction, and then started playing as a regular engagement at the theater and clearly connected with an audience. It was the number 3 most attended foreign language film this year at the theater.
Yeah, and then number 2 was another Spanish film. So we had 2 films from Spain in the top 5, and that is Everybody Knows, which starred Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz. It was a really great kind of thriller, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, not in a Hollywood thriller kind of way.
Yeah, not in a traditional thriller way, but yes.
European thriller kind of way. And we should mention, too, all of those movies pale in comparison to the attendance that came out for our number 1 foreign language film this year, which was, of course, Parasite. This year's Roma, I guess, maybe?
Yeah,
foreign language film that nobody cares that they had to read. They just love the movie and can't wait to see it. Although, still a thriller.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And we also had made some comments that Parasite almost could be on the best comedy, too, because it certainly has some intentional laughs in it as well. But I was very surprised that we had no French films in the top 5 this year.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a little unusual. So the fact that there's 2 from Spain, but no French.
I was even telling you before we recorded that even going through like my top 5 list, I ended up going with just English language films because there was good foreign language films. Some of them I saw at the film festival this past year, but weren't really like theatrical releases that everybody had access to. So I was like, oh man, I still have a few to catch up on, but it wasn't quite the year for foreign language films for me.
Well, I'm gonna disagree with that in a way, but
I mean bulk. Like I had a lot. I think I had like 6 of my 10 last year were foreign language films. So
gotcha.
Just the bulk on my list. But now last year the big headline was the year of the documentary. You had the RBGs, Won't You Be My Neighbor, 3 Identical Strangers, Free Solo. Yep. Like it was just hit after hit after hit in the documentary category, which we did have hits. We have our top 5 here documentaries, but didn't quite have like the big banner year pull that it had last year.
Yeah, and you'll see a trend in the types of documentaries that were popular this year. So number 5 on the list this year was They Shall Not Grow Old. They Shall Not Grow Old, the Peter Jackson World War I documentary.
Which includes 2D and 3D showings. That
Correct.
was like, you know, some special events. Then it got an actual traditional release. And that was another one of those, the reaction to it. People just walked out with their jaws just dragging on the floor. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe
that. That was one of those films that the studio, Warner Brothers, who just doesn't really release small little films anymore, had no idea what to do with it. They put it out as a Fathom event. That did so well that they thought, oh, maybe we should actually just release it. And then they did, and it did great business. So, yeah, they were right to do that.
And the quick note for anybody who hasn't been listening week in, week out to Cedar Lee Radio, or just generally reading up on how these work, the way that it came out at the end of the year last year, They Should Not Grow Old came out after the cutoff date to qualify for Oscars, so it's in qualification for the upcoming Academy Awards next month at this point. Wow, that was quick.
Yep.
The number 4 movie was Apollo 11 in the documentary category, the documentary about Apollo 11. Dropped the ball on that description there, but that one is really unique and one of my favorite docs of the year. Just it's all archival footage, and as someone who wasn't alive when that mission happened, it just puts you right there with archival footage. In that time period to experience the drama, the suspense, and then sort of like the thrill of victory when that mission was able to pull off what it did pull off.
And the number 3 movies is our first one that kind of is the trend of this year for popular documentaries, and that was Echo in the Canyon, our first music-based documentary. Again, a movie that played at the film festival and then went on to have a really successful run here at the Cedar Lee.
Number 2 is continuing that trend, the movie that on its surface you're like, that's going to be a documentary. I wouldn't guess this one to be a hit, but I watched it. It was an amazing film. It's not even my musical category, and that is Amazing Grace, the Aretha Franklin documentary about her recording. Was it still the best-selling gospel album, I think?
I believe it is.
All time, like in this very small, very intimate church that just watch it. Amazing Grace is amazing.
And then the number 1 is Pavarotti, which is the documentary all about Luciano Pavarotti. So we had 3 music docs that were our top 3 docs this year.
And I think if we had continued that list, I think like 6, 7, and 8 were also music docs. Like it was just that was clearly the trend this year. And again, the great attendance. It just wasn't that like explosive attendance that we had in previous last year for the documentaries. But also, I was noticing too, all of those. Well, I guess you have World War I as a topic, but they all are they are kind of like that feel good, celebratory documentary. So then we shuffle everything together. Our overall top 10 at the Art House this year, just so you kind of see how they all fit together. Number 10 is Jojo Rabbit from the comedy category.
Number 9 is Judy.
Number 8, Rocket Man.
Number 7, The Farewell.
Number 6 is Pavarotti.
Number 5, Parasite.
Number 4 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Number 3 is The Irishman, again, which did all that business in just a few weeks.
Yeah. Number 2 is Harriet.
And number 1, as we mentioned before, the biggest movie of the year was Downton Abbey.
So that is based on the attendance at the theater this calendar year. Now, based very unscientifically, is on our top 5 each year. Dave, do you have any caveats or anything that you need to mention before we get into your list?
No, I think it's interesting though that my all the films on my top 5 either did play at the Cedar Lee or are going to soon be playing at the Cedar Lee. So it was a year that usually, I'll have some bigger mainstream movie that we didn't play, or a smaller little film that might have just played the Cinematheque or something like that. But this year they're actually all Cedar Lee alumni or coming up.
Right. I was checking mine real quick. Yeah, mine are all that way too in my top 5. I would say like my most memorable cinematic experience was at the Cinematheque, but that wasn't a movie from this year, so it doesn't count on my list.
There you go.
Do you want to start off with your number 5 this year, Dave?
Sure, absolutely. My number 5 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's hilarious and incredibly entertaining revisionist version of what it was like around the Manson family time in Hollywood.
That is my number 4. So we're already hitting some overlap, which I imagine is going to happen quite frequently here. Did anything stand out to you from that one, like in comparison to other Tarantino movies, like aesthetically or not? To me, people kept using the phrase it's like a hangout movie because you just sort of like hang out with these characters in a way that I didn't find that to be very new, I guess, in this one.
No, what I liked about it was the way he kind of expanded his use of, he always is so great at using music in his films, but this one he expanded his soundscape and included sort of like the period ads and commercials and things like that to really just kind of soak you in the time.
Right.
And I just thought he did an amazing job with that. And just the performances he got out of both Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt, I think, is actually right now in a lot of people's lists as kind of a front runner for maybe winning the Best Supporting Actor Oscar, which I think would be very cool and interesting. And Joe Pesci probably is upset about that, but what are you going to do?
It did have a vibe of, like you said, it slightly expanded because obviously did K. Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s and Reservoir Dogs. But like you said, this is also period specific music, although actually that wasn't period specific in the early 90s. It was more like Super Sounds of the 70s. But yeah, just including the ads that would happen before or after a song would play. Like you said, just gave it just enough of that touch where it felt like you were just kind of tuning into that radio station in that period that was really, really specific. I'm kind of not upset, but it seems weird to me coming out of that theater. I think it was the second time I watched it. DiCaprio's role really seemed a lot more nuanced than I gave it credit for on first viewing because he's playing like 2 or 3 other characters in the movie.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then you get the actual like true DiCaprio character when he's kind of like the
insecure actor guy.
Exactly. Yeah. So like I really wasn't paying attention to how many layers of work he was actually doing there. The first time through in that movie because he's just so casual with it and he's so good at it that it looks so effortless that it doesn't grab you as a flashy thing.
What was your number 5 there, Aaron? We already know what your number 4 was.
That was my number 4. My number 5 is actually The Irishman, which I still have yet to get back to a third time, but I keep meaning to because going through the second time, there's so much in it the first time that it's an overwhelming experience in a great way. But it didn't quite floor me the way, again, expectations were way too high for me on that one.
Sure.
But the second time I see a Scorsese movie is usually when I kind of see it on its own terms. I know what he's, see like, oh, that's what he was doing with this one. And I really, really enjoyed it so much more the second time and was seeing little nuances that I hadn't noticed before the first time through that I feel like with that kind of a running time, like 3 hours, 40 minutes, upon repeat viewings, little things are going to start popping up more and more. As you mentioned on the show, like the payoff by the end, like I've never felt that way. Maybe a little bit with Silence, with a Scorsese film where you're really seeing a character deal with the weight of what, in this case, like his whole life and just sitting alone in a retirement home, completely forgotten by everybody. Everybody else is either dead or completely, wrote off this character. They're not speaking to him anymore. Was something a little bit more meditative, I guess, than what I was expecting from a Scorsese movie.
Well, that was my number 4. So we basically just switched our 4 and 5
yeah,
on our list. Yep, so there we go. And my number 3 movie of the year was Midsommar by Ari Aster, the just fantastic, very non-traditional horror film about, a young woman who goes to Sweden with her boyfriend and trouble ensues, shall we say. But I just loved that movie.
I need to confess to you, I still have not caught up with that one, but as I'll show you, it's the second one on my list of the ones I need to get to. So
and I can verify, folks, he literally just held up a piece of paper. Yeah. So I couldn't read it. He just held it up quickly, but he at least attempted
it exists
to make me
and it's
believe
on there,
he had it written down.
Yeah.
All right. No, I've seen Midsommar I think 3 times so far, and it's including the director's cut that was reissued out. That we didn't play the director's cut at the Cedar Lee. We did play that over at the Capitol, but it was it's just really, really good.
So, which one is on your list? Is it the director's cut or the theatrical cut?
It would just be the traditional theatrical cut, although the director's cut did have one. A lot of times director's cuts, there's just stuff in there. There's a reason it was cut out. There is one scene in the director's cut that absolutely fleshes out some stuff that makes it a lot better.
Okay.
And there's other stuff that's just kind of, we just expanded the scene. It's a little bit more, but there's one scene that is kind of critical that is in there that after seeing it, I was like, that makes the whole motivations a lot more clear.
Okay.
So
So as someone who has not seen it yet, which one should I start with?
I would say do the director's cut. And
okay.
I think the director's cut might be, someone had told me it was like the only way you could watch it, at least on some streaming platform. It wasn't even an option to watch the theatrical at this time. But that is, I don't know if that person lied. So don't take that as the truth. I don't know that for sure.
Well, if I haven't seen a movie before, like if it was a movie from like the 60s and there's like a director's cut on Criterion, I would generally be like, well, that's the one the director wants you to watch, so watch that one. So I was going to go with that one anyway, but just wanted to know what the preference was there.
Sure. And what was your number 3 movie, Aaron?
My number 3 is Harmony Korine's Beach Bum, which...
Interesting. Okay.
When I was kind of focusing on my top 3, kind of putting them in order, I kind of went with, and these may kind of float as I have a list of maybe like 8 to 10 films like that I still need to see. I haven't seen Uncut Gems and Waves and Marriage Story, which may or may not, bump up into some of these. But my top 3 at least were all ones where I just had such an experience watching it, and then I felt that they needed a boost. Someone to be an advocate for them. Like, no, this isn't a really interesting thing that's going on here in this particular movie. The cast alone for Beach Bum is a curiosity that I think would intrigue most people. If you're like, you've got Matthew McConaughey, you've got Martin Lawrence, you've got Jimmy Buffett, you've got Snoop Dogg, you've got Zac Efron. Right. It kind of just is a wait, what? Kind of asks you to kind of look at it. I don't know. It's garish. It's really kind of in your face.
It's a lot of fun.
Ugly with its like a color scheme and the decadence to it. But if you can get past it, there's a really interesting story there of like what gives life meaning, and maybe not yours and mine necessarily, but for Moondog as McConaughey is playing it. I find it kind of interesting that you go through about a third of the movie and he just seems like a Charles Bukowski-esque character who's just wandering around bars and producing poetry, and then you find out that he's married to someone who's obscenely wealthy, and like he doesn't have to be just slumming it around bars. He has access to this obscene amount of wealth, and then that is taken care of in due process there throughout the movie. But I would recommend it as an interesting double feature at this point with another movie from this year, Gaspar Noé's Climax. If you want to have like a really, really interesting, fairly trippy double feature there.
Yes, full of all kinds of vibrant colors.
Oh, yeah.
Well, my number 2 movie this year hasn't opened here at the Cedar Lee yet, but it'll be coming on January 10th, and that is Sam Mendes' 1917, which is just a remarkable movie and will absolutely be an Oscar contender. It is truly a remarkable achievement of direction and production design and just edge of your seat sort of suspense as these 2 soldiers are trying to complete this mission to save the lives of 1,600 other soldiers during World War I. It's just a really compelling, great film.
And I was trying to talk this up to a buddy of mine who had just seen the trailer for it. A fellow film geek, like he's really into the production end. He knows the directors, and I mentioned to him, he's like, yeah, the whole they're really not playing up the whole one take aspect of this movie, and he was like, wait, what? And which just sort of proves the point in the marketing for it. It's just kind of being marketed as like that amazing awards-worthy World War I movie, but it's a single take story.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean,
so I get a question mark at the end of that. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's like Birdman, you know what I mean? It has that sort of, like artificial one take nature, and it's so fluid, and it's but it doesn't take in total real time because the movie's about 2 hours long, but the actual events, it's not like Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, which everything takes place in real time. In a real time kind of thing, but it is a very fluid one take kind of thing. But there is more than the running time of the film lapses in it.
Gotcha.
It does have the effect of a one take kind of thing, and it's remarkable. And I think the opening shot is a legitimate, like uninterrupted, like 10-minute cut or so, 10-minute take or something like that. So it's really, but just, and who cares if that was just the gimmick and that was all it was?
Right.
It is
really
way more than that. Yeah. I mean, it is just really a great movie.
Well, so unlike Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, like you and I could shoot something in one apartment, and it's not necessarily a technical wonder that we got it all in one take. This is like you said, even just the opening 10-minute sequence. It's a battlefield in World War I. Like that is an amazing just feat in coordination on its own.
Yeah, the level of precision in getting that film made is remarkable.
Yeah.
And what was your number 2, Aaron?
My number 2 is, well, for today, because these two kind of go back and forth. I was going to cop out and do a tie, but I'm going to make a definitive. Okay, fine. Her Smell is the number 2 film on my list. Alex Ross Perry's film from this year with a ferocious Elizabeth Moss in the central role there. I just wanted to plug that it's gonna feel pretty unwatchable for the first hour because you're just watching like the height of like narcissistic manipulator, substance abuser, just like setting her world on fire. Backstage after this punk, she's in kind of like a Riot Girl kind of 90s punk rock kind of band. But it's structured in a really interesting way where it's like 5 scenes, I want to say, and there's some intercutting of archival home video footage from when they win like their first gold record, and then they immediately destroy it, and they have that whole like punk aesthetic going through and through. But in 5 different scenes, you just see like the downfall and then sort of like the return, sort of the saving grace of this character in the long run. It's a really cool structure that doesn't feel as long to me. It doesn't feel as long as the running time is. I think it's a little over 2 hours. It goes through pretty smoothly, but your central performance that guides you through the whole thing is Elizabeth Moss, and I cannot believe she's just not getting much more buzz or credit or talk about her role in this movie during the award season right now.
Yeah, she should 100% be right at the top of the list this year for best performances by male or female. I mean, she's just great. Like the fact that the Screen Actors Guild, the SAG nominations came out and she wasn't one of them. I'm like, you all know who she is. She won a lot whenever she was on Mad Men.
I was going to say, she's not some like pariah in the industry, is she, that I'm unaware of? Like, it's kind of criminal at this point. And even Alex Ross Perry wrote like an open letter a little while ago. I think I read it on like IndieWire or Deadline or someplace because they don't have a ton of money for her awards campaign.
Right.
And was just saying like, hey, everybody, this happened here. What an amazing, because she's also collaborated with him over the years on several movies now as well. She was great in Queen of Earth too, and there was no recognition for that one. So
yeah, she was fantastic.
Someday.
Well, my number 1 movie for the year is also what I think is truly one of the best films of the decade, and that is Parasite, which we've talked a lot about on the show, and I don't know that I have much more to say other than the fact that if you're still waiting to see Parasite, please go see Parasite.
Turn this off. Go see it.
Yeah, go see Parasite. It's fantastic.
Because right now we're about to spoil the ending for Parasite.
No.
So Dave, what did you? No.
I went to see another film this week at the Cedar Lee with some friends, and they hadn't seen Parasite yet. And my friend was asking me, "Well, what's it about?" And I'm like, "The less you know, the better." And I gave her the very like Vegas sort of description. And I'm like, "Just go see it. Trust me. You just want to be surprised by it."
Well, that's why I think the beauty of that story structure is that the way that the trailer played, the way that it was basically described, IMDb synopsis, print reviews, it would just say like, oh, it's a con artist family who con their way into, this wealthy house. And that's super intriguing. And it's so well done. You're like, I was fascinated. That story alone was plenty.
Yeah.
And then there's more to it. And you're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Okay. We're going that direction, which it's not spoiler territory at all. But you don't see that kind of thing happening a lot in mainstream Hollywood films. Like, we don't jump genres here. I think maybe that's one reason, like we said with Jojo Rabbit, people are just like, well, wait, but this is a serious topic. Why are you making me smile right now? A lot of times general American audiences don't respond too well to a mix of genres.
That is very true.
Well, then, this isn't exactly a mix of genres, but there is kind of a mix of different styles in my number 1 movie, which is Last Black Man in San Francisco from Joe Talbot. It played, I think, all too briefly at the Cedar Lee and art houses in general this year. It was wildly inventive the way that it told a story, but it was also extremely touching and moving. It had a lot to say in a comedic way, in a dramatic way, in a tragic way. There's a core friendship on screen that it was one of those like lasting like pairings where you're like, it's two people who generally care about each other. They're there for each other through ups and downs and hard times. They're trying to help each other out as best they can. It's a great representation of true friendship, but also this idea of what gives someone that feeling of home within this movie. At one point, sort of the comedic element of this movie is it's the old family home that this guy no longer lives in. Another couple does, but he stops by to like, paint the trim around the window because he's caring about this house still. And they're like, would you stop it? Get away. They're shooing him away like he's a stray dog who just, wandered into the yard. But there's also this idea in there is about like the creation of the art, the state of the planet and the environment that we're in. There's this even kind of interesting take on the Greek chorus where there's just like these kind of streetwise professors. It was like 4 or 5 characters that just sort of bug the main character that just kind of comment on the culture that they're all living in and how the changing times are. And it's another movie that's straight out of that Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, going back to like Medicine for Melancholy, Sorry to Bother You, Blind Spotting. The last few years have been very fertile artistic ground for San Francisco, Oakland, Bay Area.
Yeah, it was a really, really good film. I agree that not enough people saw it.
It did not. So I mentioned you off mic, Dave, but I didn't put Parasite on my list because I knew you were talking about it. So a little cheat there, but I'm also not quite sure where that's going to fit. Maybe in my top 5, but it's definitely in the top 10.
Gotcha.
I also desperately need to see that again. So
yeah, I've only seen it twice, and that's not enough. And as I mentioned, we have one film that's going to be opening at the Cedar Lee on January 3rd, and that is the new documentary Cunningham, which is all about choreographer Merce Cunningham. This is going to be presented both in 2D and 3D. We've had another 3D documentary all about dance that we showed a few years ago, I think over at the Capitol, though not at the Cedar Lee, and it really does bring a lot of the visual elements of the movement to life. So I'd encourage you to come out and see it in 3D if you can.
That is an interesting idea. I hadn't thought about that because when you say 3D, I don't picture like a documentary, first of all, I guess, which is my own bias. But yeah, like especially a choreographer documentary in 3D would be a great way to use 3D.
It is. It's a really good use of the technology. When we showed Wim Wenders' Pina, it was really, it's a great use of the technology.
Well, before we sign off, there are a few special events this week at the theater we want to let you know about. It's 2020 now, and as we've kind of unofficially thematically done, the January late shift film is a Kubrick film. So this month we've got, for the Melt Bar and Grill late shift series, A Clockwork Orange on the big screen, Saturday, January 4th at 9:30 p.m. and midnight, and Sunday, January 5th at 7 p.m.
And also on Saturday, January 4th at midnight, we have our monthly screening of the Rocky Horror Picture Show as part of the Melt Bar and Grill late shift. That, of course, features a live floor show by Simply His Servants.
Our next screening of National Theater Live is Present Laughter, Sunday, January 5th at 11 a.m. and Wednesday, January 8th at 7 p.m. This is Andrew Scott starring in Noel Coward's provocative comedy. Andrew Scott, as most American audiences, including people in my house, know him as Moriarty from the Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch.
And he was also on the last season of Fleabag. He was great on that. So yeah, he's and actually has a small role in 1917. So he'll be coming up here. Yep. And also we have Fathom Events presenting Doctor Who Live with a Q&A and screening on Sunday, January 5th at 2 p.m. This is a showing of the season 12 premiere as well as an advanced showing of the second episode, followed by a live streaming Q&A with the cast.
Fathom Events presents Mystify, Michael Hutchins. This is a documentary about the lead singer of INXS. We will be screening it Tuesday, January 7th at 7 p.m. If you're a regular listener and are wondering where our Cedar Lee 3 picks are for this week, follow links in the show notes or head over to any of our social media accounts where we are doing our week-by-week slow reveal of the best films in different categories that we personally picked. So this week, our Cedar Lee 3 picks are for best foreign language films of 2019. Don't forget to join us next week when we'll be discussing the 2 new films opening. They are 1917 and Just Mercy. As always, thank you for tuning in to Cedar Lee Radio and lending us your ears this week. All the music heard on the show is original music written by Grant Heineman and performed by the New Heights Jazz Ensemble. Used with their permission, of course. Visit clevelandcinemas.com for correct showtimes and to purchase advance tickets. Also, there are links in the show notes. You can use those if you'd like as well. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Cedar Lee Theater, spelled with an R-E at the end because we're fancy like that. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcast, and while you're subscribing, leave us a rating and review, or better yet, tell a fellow film geek about the show. We'll see you at the movies.